Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this webinar brought to you by the manufacturer with Microsoft and Technology Management. The title is Real-Time Control, Impossible Dream, or is it a realistic objective for the smaller manufacturer? My name's Nick Peters. I'm editorial director here at the manufacturer. I'm delighted to welcome on board today Robert Pope, who's channel manager at Microsoft, and James Crowther, Managing Director of Technology Management, also known as TechMan. TechMan has been a gold partner of Microsoft's for the last 15 years or so, and James is the only MVP, most valuable player in the UK, for Microsoft Dynamics Business Central, a position of high honor indeed. A quick look at the agenda. First of all, Rob's going to give us a 360-degree overview of the latest news from Microsoft. And then James will drill down into how Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central can give smaller manufacturers the real-time control that offers a step change in business performance. When they're all done, we'll have some time for questions. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. It's a text-based system. Just drop your name and your question into the chat box. I'll be watching it at my end, and we'll get to as many questions as time will allow. And also, just by way of information, we're going to be sending everybody a video copy of the webinar, along with all the slides and all our contact details. You can share it with your colleagues or refresh your own memory just by having a look at it at the end. So if you need to get in touch with any of us after the event, please do so. Right, time to get cracking. Rob Pope, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Nick. So I thought I'd spend the next 10-15 minutes or so really giving you a bit of a reset and an understanding of where Microsoft are today. We've been through our own journey of digital transformation over the last few years. And a lot of that has really impacted the way that we have developed our services. And note I call them services rather than products, but also how then we engage with our users, our customers, people like yourselves. And I think our overarching change in strategy, our overarching mission now is to really empower you as users of our technology. And as we move into an environment where we provide you with a service, we provide you with a platform that you can consume on a per month, per user basis, it's really about empowerment. It's really about helping you make the best of the innovation that we drive into the marketplace. It's about how we can help you really leverage the technology, but also the digital transformation changes that brings into your organization. When we start to look at where we see that innovation, and we start to look actually of the significant investments that we as Microsoft are now making into manufacturing, into business applications all up, you start to see the real change and move of applications away from being, in effect, relatively static platforms of data with forms and a little bit of reporting. You start to see how business applications and Dynamics in particular can start to bring to the table real innovation and real digital transformation to you all as customers, particularly with the ongoing trials and tribulations and changes in the marketplace. And what I thought I'd do is just give you a bit of an insight in the next few minutes, just give you a video overview of some of the ways that we view the marketplace and some of the innovation that we're bringing to the table.
We live in a time of relentless business transformation. We're connecting customers, products, people, and data wins. Where smarter wins. A time where Microsoft technology can help transform organizations, bringing together company and customer, patient and provider, factory and field service, people and government, storefront and supply chain. Without silos, without limits. Just customers, products, people, and data connected and ready. This is Dynamics 365. Microsoft Business Applications. Unlock next.
And you'll see our messaging there is all around Unlock Next. This is where we see this huge opportunity that digital transformation is creating in the marketplace. And how do we use Microsoft technology, not just business applications technology, but also wider business productivity technology, such as the investments we make in Outlook and Excel and SharePoint and OneDrive and Yammer and all of the other tools that I'm sure you're all familiar with. Now, when we look at the market as it stands today, there's clearly some very significant shifts. Many of the movements are driven by digital transformation, and in a moment or two, I'm going to give you a template that we as Microsoft use as to how we can look at an organization and help them understand the impact of digital transformation on that business. But we look at the change in customer and buying patterns. We look at the way that buyers now buy based on a customer experience, based on not on the traditional value components that normally people would buy from. We look at how, and I'm sure many of you are the same, that every time you book a hotel or buy a new item, you use Amazon to look up the recommendations, you use TripAdvisor to look at the detail of that hotel. People are coming into the buying cycle now having a far greater understanding of the product and service that they want to buy well before your salespeople have access to those potential customers. But we also see that productivity within organizations like yourselves is impacted by a plethora of applications that don't work well together, that don't sit in the same environment, that require those users to switch in and out of applications. You'll see, and James will present this later in this session, that part and parcel of the investment we have made, particularly around Business Central, the component we're going to talk about, is actually to deliver a lot of that functionality where all of you tend to live your lives, which is actually in Outlook. So the fact that you can create an order, create an invoice, and understand the current status of your customer without having to leave Outlook, which is where you more than likely spend most of your time. And we start to look at that switching, we start to look at that, the inefficiency that's brought to bear by virtue of the fact that users aren't leaving one application and changing to another. It has a huge impact on productivity, but also the ability and the speed of the business that you can run through. But when we start to look then at the impact of digital transformation, we start to look at the growth that digital transformation presents to an organization, but also the threat for those organizations that don't transform. The fact that within the S&P 500, many of them, 40%, will no longer exist. Those organizations go by the wayside because they haven't adopted, not necessarily technology for technology's sake, but they haven't invested and they haven't innovated and they haven't moved with the market. And we start to see the digital trend having a huge impact on manufacturing. We start to see organizations losing customers because they're not engaged. We start to see organizations using Internet of Things to be able to manage their assets more readily. But we also see this huge shift to service-based businesses. And in fact, when we start to look at that service-based model, we start to look at some of the big innovation that's taken place in the marketplace that's being driven by digital trends. And we start to look at that under 4 key pillars. And when we as Microsoft talk to organizations, we use 4 pillars of digital transformation to help an organization use a template to understand how they can help or how they can look at their own organization. We talk about how that business engages customers and how that has changed. We talk about how that business can optimize its operations. And clearly, in a manufacturing environment, that's a very real and true example of where Dynamics business applications come to the fore. How do they make that more streamlined? How do they make it more efficient? How do you also transform your products? And these are all interlinked. When we look at how you can transform your products, we use examples like Power by the Hour, where, for example, Rolls-Royce aero engines have changed from being bought or sold as a CapEx item that's attached to an airline and is now sold on a service model. It's sold by Power by the Hour. You pay, the airline pays for what they use. Those kind of models are only able to be implemented with digital technology sat in the background, allowing you to monitor and control and have that real ready insight into the platforms, into the components, into the assets, and into your wider systems. But we also then talk about how you can empower your employees, bringing them along, particularly allowing those employees to use technology efficiently and effectively is a key part of that digital transformation story. But when we start to look at that from the next step through, we start to look at the key impact that we're seeing that digital transformation is driving, and it's huge quantities of data. We start to look at the way that Microsoft can help you, and you'll see this in James's presentation shortly, is that as well as capturing that data, we can then start to drive real intelligence across that data. We can take that data and then provide actions against that data. And a lot of that leads us very much into the way that, and I know James is going to talk specifically about Business Central, which is a kind of back office platform. But when we look into the wider Microsoft portfolio, all of those components then form part of our Dynamics 365 portfolio. They're connected together. They deliver a modern, unified solution that allows you as an organization to really look at digital transformation across your whole organization as to how you deliver those 4 key pillars. We also bring together other platforms that many of you will be familiar with, which then leverage all the information contained. And you can understand then, as I talk about that information and that data, what we're then talking about is artificial intelligence. We talk about artificial intelligence and the changes that that's going to bring to an organization. We start to talk about things like digital agents. We start to talk about how in 2025, 80% of your interaction will be with an organization will be via a digital agent. We start to talk about how artificial intelligence can improve your business process, but also drive your users to insight, but also to drive them to a process that will guide them through accurately, quickly, but also take steps out of the equation with regards to the kind of things that users find hard work. Creating an order, for example, we can use artificial intelligence to read an email and start to predict and start to understand using cognitive services that actually an email from a prospect is an email for a quote, and we can start to prepare that paperwork and prepare that process in the background to guide the user through and potentially take some of the steps out of the process. But the important thing for artificial intelligence is that that artificial intelligence has to come and has to rely on one key factor, and that factor is data. And Dynamics, more than anything, is, to continue the analogy you'll see on your screen, is the oil well. Data is the new oil. Dynamics is the oil well, to continue the analogy. And that then allows you to use that quantity of data, to use that information and really bring that information to bear within your organization to drive artificial intelligence, machine learning, cognitive services, and all of the advanced functionality that you'll start to see us bringing into our platforms, made possible by virtue of the way that we now deliver our Dynamics components. One thing as a separate aside, which for any of you who are interested in digital transformation and artificial intelligence, we offer a free book. You can basically put it into any well-known search engine and use the term future computed. It will give you an insight as to on artificial intelligence. It will also give you our point of view, not just Microsoft's, but we work with many of the other main vendors who I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. Because artificial intelligence brings to bear lots of changes. It brings lots of opportunities, and potentially also a number of areas where organizations have to operate ethically. So you'll see that within the Future Computed book, it's free of charge. You can download it. It's also available in Amazon. If you've got an interest in this area, it's a great place to start to understand the kind of things that we're bringing into the future. But now it gives me great pleasure to hand over to James Crowther, who will give you a bit of an insight really into the real-time control that we can provide to a manufacturer using the Dynamics platform. James, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob, and good afternoon all. Delighted to be here. Hope to deliver some insights into the whole set area this afternoon. Just waiting for the screen to click on. So I think none of us can deny that technology is having a major impact and continues to do so. Almost what we assume is normal this year becomes old-fashioned next year, and new innovation continues to come down at a rate that it's often difficult, even for those of us in the industry, to catch up with. What I'd like to do this afternoon is just run through really where manufacturing businesses in the UK, in my experience, are starting to really leverage more and more of this technology specifically around the Dynamics platform to take advantage and to keep them in a competitive state, to enable them to keep hold of their people and impress their customers. And that really goes through solving a number of problems which are not new. You know, siloed systems have been around. I've been in this industry for 20 odd years and continually had to battle to try and connect different sets of data together, different systems. The old paradigm of having a desktop with different icons on it, and if you went into one, you were really stuck in that silo, and never that they should talk. That's really starting to go away. We're seeing, as Rob described with the kind of Outlook integration, but many other forms as well, a situation where you can use the application and the device of choice to collect and analyze the data that you need. That gets down to removing the situation where you have multiple systems, duplicate data across those systems, and it doesn't quite marry up in the way that you expect it to. And that causes confusion. How many businesses still spend time where one person will ring another and say, I just need to check this because I've seen two slightly different numbers, and even if the numbers match, there's still a lack of confidence that the information that they're looking at is actually right. And that's something, if productivity is going to rise the way that we need it to, we're going to have to remove that time wasted. Manual processes. You know, AI is coming down the track. I'm somebody who's a little bit more skeptical. I like to see the benefits of technology before just buying into it. But even in the last 12 to 18 months, I've seen concrete examples, some of which I'll talk through, of where AI, pattern recognition, cognitive services that will look at a photograph and understand what's in that image are starting to make a real productivity difference to businesses out there. The reporting piece, how many of you have believe you have adequate reporting? You know, how many of you have fixed reporting where the reporting you get is what you have to live with, and you constantly have a different question that arises each day, but no way of doing that. And the other final one I'd highlight is security issues. Gone are the days where you can assume you're too small to be a target. We've seen everything from ransomware attacks to you know, actual hacking take place in small to medium-sized enterprises in the UK that's caused them serious business issues. So everybody has, I think every customer out there is constantly having to ask the question of how can their systems respond and enable them to present a more coherent, efficient, better experience for both their customers and their people. That's different for every businesses. But you know, we have to reduce the dependence on individual key members of staff, reduce the dependence on them firefighting in a way where they are critical to the transaction rather than the strategic progress. That's getting the systems to work for you rather than you work for the system is a mantra. We can no longer allow, in effect, key workarounds to become part of normal life. Too many organizations discover they have a need, their system can't cope with that, and so they build up these, you know, very laudable systems in that they solve the problem quickly, but they're limited by the knowledge and the expertise and to some extent the training, and those siloed workarounds become a hindrance in the long term to what they need to do. I think you know, every organization needs accurate information. If you have a screen that you can sit at, I remember a couple of years ago going to visit a customer, manufacturing customer in just the other side of Birmingham from where we are, and the financial controller sat the other side of the desk and said, I don't like the system. And I asked why, and she says, well, it lies to me. And you know, what she meant by that was that the numbers that it gave her were consistently wrong. Now, that wasn't the system's fault necessarily. A lot of it was around her understanding and their understanding of the system, but it still resulted in the same thing. So we have to make these systems easier to use, easier to understand. So actually, you don't have to be, you don't have to complete a university degree equivalent course to be able to understand what you need to do. It just needs to be obvious and simple and straightforward. And part of that is about making it modern software that people can just use the way that they use a mobile phone app. You don't expect to go on a training course when you download something from the app stores. So why should you expect to go on a long, complicated training course every time you want to do something new in your business system? Key to that, I think, is, and I fully admit to being a little bit biased, but Microsoft's Dynamics 365 Business Central, I think, is a key pillar in that for medium-sized businesses in the UK. It solves a lot of those problems, and some of them are obvious. The connectivity I, as a consultant, can do in seconds with this system is just awesome. You know, if you have an external web resource, if you have a file, I can map that in without writing loads of code that I'd have historically done and customizing your system. The capability to do that is just built in. So connecting it up to sources of information within your business, that might be something as advanced as IoT, to something that some sort of quality or manufacturing machine spits out as a good old-fashioned file, to external sources as well. So we can pull in sources, databases of information. We can go off, query those, and bring those back in. All of that allows you to make quicker, smarter decisions. Be sure that they're right. You don't have the question marks, and that enables you then to go forward and start the business on a track of upwards. And it's that single comprehensive solution. Now, Dynamics is not something where you're going to log into the front screen every day. You may not actually even use it directly. You may be somebody in a drawing office that's doing a configuration in your drawing software. It may be somebody externally who's using an e-commerce system. It may be a customer or a supplier who's linking in and building in. But that all brings into that central pot of data. As Rob describes, data is tremendously valuable as long as it's correct, as long as it's accurate, reliable, but also then business process. What should the system understand needs to happen next, and how does it prompt that to happen without somebody having to sit there and make that and tell people that that has to happen? It prompts them on the device that they need. We have lots of devices at our fingertips now. You know, I get asked when we deploy Business Central out there, okay, so how many people use the phone client? And you know, it's almost everybody. Not where you think that to extend the working hours, but actually walking around your business, you get asked questions about what's our inventory, what's our stock count on this particular item. Could we do that? Do we have the capacity? What would that cost to do? And taking your phone out your pocket and looking that up from your core business system should be as easy as taking your phone out your pocket and checking your email. That's become normal, right? So why can't you do that for actually the bigger source of information than maybe your email or your messaging system? And that capability is just built in. That can be configured to show whatever you need it to show. You know, that again is not a task that you need an expert like hopefully myself to come along and help you with. It's something that's drag and drop to make those screens show what you need to, when you need, how you need to, where you need to. And within, as Rob described, within Outlook, you know, even within Outlook on a tablet, we can click into the Business Central pot of information, and we can go and click to see what that customer or supplier, what the current ledger position is with that. We can see whether they're overdue, what outstanding orders they already have, how much they've spent year to date, how you know, just any and all information that's really valuable to you as an organization to just have Bill Gates summed it up in the 90s, at your fingertips. Finally, that seems to be something that we can deliver on easily, automatically, as part of this. And you can reply to that. So from Outlook, I can raise a sales order, and that can automatically attach the order confirmation back against that email and send it back with perhaps a few words I care to type to that customer, or a purchase order to that supplier. Our interaction via email is enabled right through to our core business system. And all of that gives you accurate information because you're making it easy for your people to keep the system up to date. Actually, you're making it easy for them to do their job in the way that they want to do it. And the byproduct of that is that you know what's been done, when it's been done, and the effect that it needs on your business. So you can then use that to make the right decisions as of now. That's where the real time comes in. You don't have to spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes getting that information to then spend 2 minutes actually deciding what to do. If you've worked in that business for a while, you probably know the decision that should be made if you have the right input. Having that information there at your fingertips is enabling in a way that really drives business. I love going to clients when they've done this process and actually sitting with them, and they describe the liberation they feel in terms of, wow, this has just allowed us to change the game, as probably our American cousins would say. And it gives you that end-to-end view. We don't have batch updates in the way that in modern systems, in the way that we traditionally have. We get that information. Somebody taps a tablet screen, that tablet that costs maybe 90, 100 pounds to put on that machine out on the shop floor, that taps output, and we see that reflected in our costs. We see it reflected in our cost of sales process. We know accurately what time was spent on that particular process. We know what's enabled next. We know whether we're ahead or behind on the plan. We know what we can promise, and that makes a total difference. And that feeds through to your customers. So your customers rely on you servicing them accurately. The promises they make, they are depending on. So as Rob pointed out, price is almost irrelevant if they can't rely on you. For you to be able to be reliable, you need the information with where you're at. I'm not telling you something you're probably not very well aware of. And we increasingly can do AI here. So we can put pictures in. Pictures of taken in a manufacturing process can be assessed. Cognitive services can produce measurements. It can produce quality forecasts. We have customers in the food sector now taking photographs of product, and that is feeding through to quality results in a very short, instantly for them, but very quickly from recognizing that as a need to having that as a working environment. Extrapolating historical data to predict where it's going in the future, to see for here, sales forecasts of product. That's really where AI really comes to the fore. It's looking for patterns you don't even know exist yet, and it's highlighting that that's a trend that you've never needed to ask. Historical reporting has always been around, okay, we need to make sure we know when this is happening. This is the machine saying to you, this is happening, we think you need to know about it. Accurate data can drive that through and deliver better outcomes. And all of that allows you to step back from each individual transaction, each process going through. Too many businesses spend time watching things to make sure it doesn't go wrong. That's the only way you can guarantee the good customer outcomes your customers demand. To grow reliably, we need to get you away from that. And I thought I'd highlight a particular customer that we worked with over the past couple of years, a company based up in Good in Manchester, in Yorkshire, sorry, a company, Timlock Building Products. They produce a product which is fairly straightforward. It's they extrude plastic for use in the building industry. So they have a whole range of products that they sell through the building merchant sector to just about anybody that is involved in the construction process. When we first met them 3 years ago, they had exactly what I've described: disparate systems, lack of visibility, a real sense of almost panic that even when things weren't going wrong, they didn't know that, and so therefore they were having to spend lots of time checking and double checking, and that just put huge administration cost. They had no integration. The customers typically sent them EDI orders, but they resulted in somebody rekeying, and they just had no visibility of what the future did. So now Dynamics has transformed them. Single integrated system, integrated EDI, which is where the majority of the merchants send through orders and the buying groups. That's enabled them to do day-to-day production planning in real time. They can take an order at 3:30 in the afternoon, and if it's justified, they can adjust the production plan tomorrow. Their production floor gets its instruction electronically and reports its output electronically. So they get to see, again, if the plan isn't followed for today, a machine breakdown or something affects that plan, they get to see the effect of that. That's transformed how they can supply to their customers. So now they've got, I think it's very close to, if not 100% on time in full, significantly achieving 100% week after week. Next day delivery guarantees that they've been able to do for their customers, and it's made them competitive. They have a fairly a product that's very competitive. They need to be competitive on price, and they've been able to do that, but still produce the returns that they need. And how's Business Central allowed them to do that? Well, across the whole of their organization, we've been able to go into the different roles in that organization and say, right, okay, how do we transform the way you process? That particular implementation, we removed over 60 critical spreadsheets from that business that they were spending time updating and then trying to interpret, and put those all back to be automatically generated information just by recording what they did when they did it. And that's the real-time control. That analytics now, when I visit their MD, he sits there with screens on his desk. He has a couple of screens that he looks at that give him real-time information of what's happening from sales through production, through his inventory levels to his customer service stats as well. And so he is only a glance away from knowing what the situation is now. If he needs to make a phone call to check something out or to push performance in a particular area, he can do that. And he's basing it on fact, not subjective judgment. So the people at the other end of that call know that they can't fudge the issue in terms of describing what's going on. And that's given him a level of control that has made a massive difference. And you might say, well, Business Central, how is one piece of software going to match everything that my business needs? My business is unique. And you're right. I've never visited two businesses. They all have 90%, maybe 95% that's in common, but all of you have your unique attributes that's probably built up over time, which gives you the competitive edge to go to the market. Business Central allows you to make the changes you need. So, organizing those screens, adding extra pieces of information all the way through the process is just a few clicks, a drag and drop away. You can make that very simple and easily. If it goes further than that and you need a whole set of business logic, Business Central has an app store where you can go and download it that somebody else has pre-built it, or we can build that for you and layer that on top. That means upgrade time, it still happens. Every month, Microsoft upgrade you automatically. And if I've produced that add-on package for you or for the market in general, I can also push improvements to that. And we've seen that over the last 12, 18 months. The add-ons that we've produced monthly updates for those. So where we get a good idea from one customer, we can share it with the others and give them the advantage in a way that doesn't cost them any time or effort to adopt and really makes it sing. As I said earlier, we can connect it to those sources. So linking it up to particularly the Office 365 set, pushing the data from Business Central into Power BI is just there. So it's not a challenge. You don't need a techie. You don't need a nerd. You can just decide what you want to achieve and go get on with it in a click and try method of operation, often with a wizard to guide you through the different process steps the first couple of times you need to do it. And that means your business, can get what it needs from its core system, and you can go focus on how do we improve. Process improvement has been part of the production floor for more years than I can remember. But your administration systems haven't had that same kind of focus. And largely that's because people have given up. I go see prospective customers and I say, well, isn't your current system capable of doing that? And they go, it might be. But we asked 6, 10 questions back in the day about could it do X, Y, and Z, and we got negative answers. So actually we learned to not waste our time. And that's a real shame. That's just a missed opportunity, and one I don't think that many businesses can afford to accept as a status quo going forward. If your business system isn't evolving with you, it's probably time that you started thinking about one that did and what the future is going to hold. It's as important as some of your production machinery. I've again seen the situation too many times where people have gone and bought that big new CNC machine or computer controlled robotics these days, and actually if we looked at the efficiency of what they've already got, we could squeeze the 5–10% that made that investment negated, not necessary. And isn't that the right thing to do? But you can't do that until you get that right data. So it's a business project, not an IT project. The IT involvement in this is going low. When I first again started, I sound like a real old man this afternoon, but started a lot of deploying ERP into an organization, kind of the hardware delivery was 50–60% of the process. We can put you on Business Central with a simple sign up on a web page and you can be ready to go, ready to start using the system. There is nothing to deliver locally to you. If you have a screen that's capable of getting to a web page, you've got what you need. And so then we need to start talking about what your business process needs to be and how we deliver that. And that's the important bit. What data do you really need to keep? Why? And how are you going to exploit it? What do you need to make sure happens in your business on time and by the right person? And what's their efficient way of getting that instruction and confirming that they've done what they need to do? How do we take as much of the process that steps out of the process as possible? How do we get you in a position where you can exploit AI and IoT and all of the other things which our community love talking about right now, but can seem a million miles away from your particular production floor, given where it's done? Well, part of that is putting systems that collect the right data in the right way, in the way that you need, and getting accurate, reliable, up-to-date information on which these AI systems can then base their recommendations. And so I hope that's given you a little bit of view of the way the world is going. I think we now move on to the Q&A. Nick,
Yeah,
I
James,
think you're due to lead that.
Yeah. James, Rob, first of all, thank you both very, very much for that. I hope the audience found that as riveting as I did. It was really, really great roundup of all the possibilities available. A quick question, just one thing, James, if you wouldn't mind. I just want to drill down to what you mean by a smaller manufacturer, as in the title. Can you define the size? Is there a sweet spot in the SME sector for Dynamics 365 Business Central?
I think, you know, it goes from really the smallest manufacturer. We've got clients using it which have maybe 2-3 production cells, and actually don't, you know, it's a relatively small part of their business. They're predominantly manufacturers, distributors who manufacture something or assemble something. And the largest, I think, we've got has over 160 devices on the shop floor. So it does range up. I think its sweet spot is probably, you know, probably 10 to 40, 50 users, as we would define the system, people across the businesses who are information workers rather than necessarily production operatives.
I've got a question here from Jerry, I think it is. It said, our existing data sits in 5 different systems. Now, if they switch to Business Central, are you able to help them migrate all that stuff out? Because obviously the actual how-to is something that will be troubling people.
So absolutely. So within Business Central, actually you don't need a lot of help from me. There's a whole area called Rapid Start, which does what it says on the tin. And what you can do in there is you can create an Excel template of any piece of information from Business Central. You drop that information into that Excel template and it will then bring it back in, validate the information, show you the errors if there are any in that data that's being imported, allow you to correct those and then rerun that import. So actually, you know, migrating your data from those separate systems, either when you initially use the system or you have a large amount of data that maybe one of your suppliers has passed on to you or so on that you want to import on an ongoing basis, is a few minutes of process.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question here from Mark. He says, James, is Business Central set up as a replacement to existing ERP systems? Is that how you see it? Yes,
I think certainly it ticks the ERP, what's traditionally the ERP boxes, but I think it goes a lot further. You know, I think we could sit here and have an hour debate, Nick, on what ERP actually is, because it tends to be different things to different organizations. And that's where I prefer the phrase business management system, because it should be holistic, it should be across the entire organization, but certainly ERP is one of those.
I mean, if we talk about finance departments, I mean, obviously they've got to manage the cash, but they've got to have an eye on regulatory compliance. I mean, we've had GDPR this year, make tax digital next year. Can cloud systems make this process easier for them?
Completely. So if you were on the Business Central platform, you will get an update applied by Microsoft. Actually, it's scheduled for next week. That gives you compliance for making tax digital when it's required in April. So, you know, no disruption to you, no having to arrange dates or talk to your supplier. That's where this type of process is automatic. GDPR, Microsoft again did the updates for that back last year when that came in. This is where cloud really has a benefit, because it takes the responsibility away from you and Microsoft manage that centrally, where the efficiencies of scale mean it's much more efficient for them to do so.
Obviously, some manufacturers have got operations outside the UK, and we all know that with what's going on at Westminster at the moment, we don't quite know what the future holds. But can Business Central support manufacturers with operations in multi-country regimes?
Absolutely. So, Business Central is actually based on the Dynamics Nav product that Microsoft have had for decades now, since they bought Navision back in the early 2000s. And that, I think that's used in something like 92 countries. Business Central now, as a cloud product, is launched. I think the latest number I heard was 19 countries. So all of the European countries, places like South Africa, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, the US and Canada are all on the list. And that list, every month, that number is going up. And we expect really to get the coverage that we had from the NAV product, really probably by the end of next year. I would hope that that's complete.
Clearly, manufacturers, as we know, are having to focus increasingly on full-blooded customer satisfaction, the customer of one being at the heart of all they do. Given the role finance plays, a critical role finance plays in business systems, but finance departments still have to play their part in this as well. Does having an integrated business system make this easier for them?
I think so. I mean, I think, control of costs is a key element, and understanding what you're committed to and when you're committed for it is important for the finance team to plan their cash flow going forward, to understand what finance is going to be, what investment decisions are going to be required to fund that customer service, shall we say. Again, there's a negotiation with a customer, and negotiation is all around understanding what it's costing you. We have to tick the customer service box, but we also have to make sure we're doing this at a profit, and understanding where you're spending time and effort, as well as perhaps material or some direct cost, is critically important to that, I believe.
Okay, James. Rob, throughout this, I've been throwing all this at James. I don't know if there's anything you've wanted to add in the course of this, or anything you want to add at this point.
Yeah, I think the switch point that we're seeing is not just the migration to the cloud from an ERP technology platform perspective. It's actually we're at the kind of first generation of what artificial intelligence and machine learning are going to add to the equation going forward. I think when we start to look at the capabilities that Microsoft has to deliver that element of technology alongside the sort of classic business apps technology, that's the bit that's going to really turn the dial into the future. It's a very exciting time now. We are very much at version 1 of machine learning, cognitive services, artificial intelligence, but I think you'll see our investments make a real impact on the way that people have traditionally used those applications, and really drive a lot more efficiency into their usage.
Okay, well, Rob, thank you very much indeed for that. It's 3:21 in London. That's all we have time for today. As mentioned earlier, we're going to send everybody who registered for this webinar a link to the on-demand version it'll be a video of all the slides and the audio. That'll be in the next few days. It's going to include all our contact details should you have any further questions or need any further information. A very big thank you to Microsoft for sponsoring this webinar, and in particular, our thanks to Robert Pope, Channel Manager at Microsoft, and James Crowther, Managing Director of TechMan. My name is Nick Peters. I'm the Editorial Director here at The Manufacturer. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. I thought it was really great. That's all from us for today. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye.